I do not hunt rabbits with a cannon. Any One Piece fans out there? Alright, this one is probably going to get a bit silly, but I did have reasons for buying it. Were they sane, sensible reasons? Well, maybe not. Let's go ahead and talk about the Bear and Son Baby Bowie. Honestly, I'm not even sure how all I'm going to test and evaluate this yet, but let's start with out-of-the-box sharpness. Now, it's made out of the same, well, what Bear and Son calls high-definition Damascus as some of their full-size blades. And the one that I tested was, well, it surprised me in terms of not only sharpness, but durability. Was it as sharp as some of their mono steel blades? No, and Ken Griffey talks about their folded pattern welded steel as having a secret sharpness, sharper than you think it is, and a lot of that's because of the natural toothiness of a pattern welded steel that's, well, this coarse, and that makes it really attractive, but could potentially lead to flaws and inclusions that might indeed be fatal. Now, I'm not nearly as concerned with that in a blade this small as compared to a bigger piece. And this one looks just fine, as they describe it, made out of 2 unspecified kinds of high carbon steel and nickel silver. Shaving sharp out of the box like its bigger brother, not quite, but test files say somewhere between like its bigger brother, 55 and 60 HRC, maybe a little closer to 60. Let's try it against a little bit of paper. And what I'm going to say is, it's not bad. It's a little inconsistent, a bit toothy. There's certain parts of the blade that are slicey than other parts of the blade. So it depends on where you catch it. So we'll also talk about specs, because this is a surprisingly thick little blade as well. And that tends to play into how slicey it is. And then when we get to cardboard, another thing that plays with how slicey it is, not only the thickness of the blade and the blade profile, but okay, I am definitely hampered by the size of the grip. Being able to get a good grip on it. Again, I'm not exactly sure how all I'm going to test this thing. For penetrating thick material, it can do it, but I think it's leading to, between the thickness of the blade, the edge, and my lack of grip on it, compared to other knives of this size, which we'll talk about, this is, yeah, certainly not the best. Let's take a quick look at the sheath. It's actually a pretty nice, thick, and, well, attractively detailed leather sheath. It was originally brown. I dyed it black to match my usual wardrobe. Comes with thumb brake retention strap, which is on the spine side of the blade. Pretty thick belt loop, which has a kind of an odd relief cut in here in the front to accommodate the thumb brake strap. But I feel like it would be better served, well, in a different setup. One, potentially horizontal scout carry, because I've been trying to carry it vertically by the belt strap, and even though this is a very short blade, it's not moving with me. So even to the point of digging into me at times. So just, yeah, not my favorite carry as is. But this is where I reveal my evil plan. Is, again, inspired by watching the recent iteration of One Piece on Netflix. I'm actually thinking about creating some sort of neck knife rig for this. And I don't know if I'm going to make it out of leather or carve something nice out of hardwood, or maybe even more bone. So there's a to be continued for you. Well, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to test and evaluate this thing. Let's talk about specs, fit and finish, build quality. And the illusion of size that comes with this knife. Sitting on the table, in my hand, it looks ridiculously tiny. But you're talking about something that has a 3.5-inch, 9-centimeter long blade that is 7/8 of an inch wide, about 2.2 centimeters, and is a full 4 millimeters thick, just like their full-size knives. And when you're talking about blade size in comparison, that is pretty much the size of many of my folders. But in comparison to pretty much any other knife in my collection, it just seems so much smaller than it actually is. Now, being not only kind of short but kind of thick, that, as you saw, does affect its cutting potential. Let's talk about some other specs. How much did I pay for this? Okay. The best deal, far and away, I found on it, which made it an impulse buy, was about $75 at Cabela's, which, frankly, this is where I dropped this on you, is half price of how much you're usually going to find it for. So there's something to throw into your decision making if you're considering something like this. Now, they also have a mono steel, stainless steel version, and I don't think it's Sandvik though. I think that one's $420. But I decided to go ahead, since there was such a great deal on it, splurge for the Damascus, because again, I'm probably going to wind up wearing this as some kind of functional, semi-functional piece of jewelry. But we took a look at the edge. Okay, it does have a bit of a hollow grind on it. Not very deep though. Lines are pretty crisp now. There was not really much of an attempt at all at putting any kind of false edge swedge on it. I did reshape it and then re-etch it. But the lines are okay. Again, like some of their other knives, crisp, clean, but not perfect. Getting down to the friendly end. Okay, well, this also adds to the fact that it feels so much smaller than any other knife in its general size class. All right, look at how skinny that grip is and also how short it is. The functional inside of the grip here in the front, that's only 2.5 inches, 6 centimeters long, giving it an overall length of 6.5 inches, 16.5 centimeters. And we're definitely going to talk about this when I figure out how to talk about handling, but gripping the knife to use it. Really skinny makes it kind of hard to hang on to, but also really short. That's, for my medium width hands, that's a 3-finger grip. So my choices are, in a forward grip, I can either put one finger over the top of the guard and have 3 fingers around the grip of the knife, or just put 3 fingers on and have my pinky hanging off the end, which I'm really not terribly fond of. So yeah, figuring out the best ways to grip the knife, that's a challenge in itself, to be continued. But okay, overall weight is only 3 ounces, 85 grams, but still, it feels more substantial. You can kind of feel like it's a fairly solid but small piece of steel in your hand. Point of balance is actually slightly inside the grip, comes with a nice, well-finished brass crossguard. And okay, this is where it deviates a bit in the quality of its bigger brothers with the bone handles. If you watch the reviews of those American Bowies, the bone handle scales on those knives were just unforgivable in how, well, I can't even call it unevenly, just completely incorrectly shaped they were. However, here, I guess they just got to work small, because they did an awesome job with this little tiny grip. It's very nicely finished. There's no hot spots. It's very even, very crisp, a little bit rounded on the sides, nicely polished, flat front and back, and I'm not getting those egregious flaws that I often get in Baron Son knives up here at the guard. I can feel it a little bit in terms of the grind here, but it's not bad at all, and there's no gaps or anything like that. So the finish of the knife, I'm going to say, it's a nice piece of jewelry. Is it a functional piece of jewelry? All right, let me see if I can figure out how to put it to the test. Oh boy. Well, so far it's been equal parts silly and disappointing. I did start making a wooden core for a scabbard for it, which does, at this point, allow me to carry it easier in a pocket or even shoved into my waistband. But I think my grander design of making a fancy neck knife out of it's been, well, deprioritized for now. Because in the test I put it to so far, I think any similar sized knife would do as good or probably better. Starting with my Pell test, yes, I could stab and thrust into my Pell. It was not nearly as uncomfortable as I thought it would be, and yes, the guard does prevent my hand slipping up on the blade. But again, I could probably do the same thing or better with any similar sized knife. And then I went ahead, okay, ran it through my usual tests for larger knives and swords. Bamboo test. The edge survived, I'll give it that. Did I accidentally wind up punching the bamboo with my fist because the blade is so short? Yeah, I did. So, yeah, that was kind of pathetic. I've tried cutting some cardboard with it. It is not a good slicer of cardboard paper. I can kind of cut packaging. Food prep, no, it's not very slicey for food prep. Took it to some wood, and yeah, any of my folding knives would do a much better job. This edge geometry combined with the difficulty I have just gripping the thing. All right, we'll get back to edge geometry here in a second, but yeah, just pretty pathetic. I probably could have done a better job with a blunt screwdriver. And yeah, I tried doing a little chopping and it fit into the wood, but all right. Effectiveness as a knife is pretty poor. It survived the tests. But, all right, given the fact that any of my other similar sized knives are better slicers than this, how much of it is the edge geometry versus the grip? So what I'm going to try to do, without completely ruining the finish on the thing, is reprofile that edge and then maybe repeat a few of those tests and see if it gets any better.
Take two.
All right, significant reprofiling of that secondary edge bevel. Took it back out, carved some wood. It did better. Also did a silly little bit of batoning and tried to use it as a striker on a ferro rod, and it worked okay, but very inconsistently. As you saw, I had quite a bit of frustration getting it to actually aim the sparks into the little burner bowl, but it finally did the job. Let's take a look at how it's doing now on, well, paper. Yeah. It's a lot slicier, but I'm going to say that toothiness of the pattern welded steel makes it inconsistent. Yeah, get a little snag here and there. How about cardboard? I cut better with it when I choke up and get my finger above the quilling, but that cost me nearly an inch of blade. Talk about that here in a second. Yeah, it's still kind of thick and fat for slicey jobs like this where you've got binding materials. I mean, I could make it work, but almost every other knife I've got in this size range is a whole lot better at all of those jobs. So let's talk about handling. Martial handling. Let's see if I can get through this with a straight face. We've already determined that this is a pretty meh utility use knife. Some of that's the blade, but a lot of it is definitely the grip, and that's going to play into this equation as well. In a forward grip, I feel like in order to get a secure grip on it, I am having to hook index finger, thumb, or both over the guard, and that's reducing my blade length by about 25%, and I don't have much to begin with. So could I still use this to make some holes in an emergency as a defensive tool? If I had nothing else, I could make it work, kind of. Would I feel confident with it at all? No. What about slashing with the belly of the knife, or snap cutting or something? Could that do any damage? Yeah, a bit, but again, would I feel confident with it at all in a life or death situation? Reverse grip. All right. Again, my hand tends to sink into it, so I've got at least one finger over the top of the guard, and I can also hook my thumb over the end of the grip, and yeah, I could make some holes, might be able to do a little bit of slashing. If I really wanted more of that, I could make myself put my whole hand behind that guard, just use that guard to keep my fist from going up the blade, make some holes with it, maybe do a little bit of slashing with it, but my confidence with it is, yeah, okay. Transitions, manipulation is kind of fun. Speaking of fun, do I have any skaters in my audience? Because you know what this really reminds me of? Those collectible finger skateboards, right? Is this the Bowie knife equivalent of a finger skateboard? Or is it just a piece of knife jewelry, a knife-like object? It's certainly pretty, but functional? All right, again, I feel like more of that is the grip than the blade, and to illustrate my point, well, I have drawers full of similarly sized knives that I put to a much better use, utility-wise, and would feel much more confident in an emergency using as a defensive blade. So if I really wanted to do thorough comparisons, this video would go on for days, but let me just do a quick sampling to make my point. All right. Going for something that's actually same blade length, but a little beefier in profile. This is the Cold Steel American Lawman. Now, I've carried this for a long time as an EDC, and I still occasionally do. It's pretty slim in the grip side to side, but yeah, not only is the blade geometry a whole lot better for utility use, but yeah, that grip, I put it to a whole lot of use. It's been a great knife, and I would feel absolutely confident using this if I needed to in an emergency as a defensive tool. Yeah, it's kind of designed to do both of those jobs. But let's go smaller. Trivia question. What is my most used small utility folder? Turns out it's a Cold Steel Kiradashi. And some of that is the blade geometry, the shape, but if you look at these side by side, yeah, that is a shorter blade. I really like using this as a tool, sits on my desk all the time, or I carry it as an EDC to use as a small utility blade. It's been very sturdy, and when we talk about price, very affordable. But a lot of what makes it useful to me, and yeah, was the only knife on me and I needed something in an emergency to use as a defensive tool, I'm getting a lot more confidence out of that grip, even though it doesn't have much blade length. Something that's a little bit more, well, equivalent in blade length and size. Talk about the Gerber Air Ranger. I haven't done a review on this knife yet. I might. But I did carry this as an EDC for a while when I was in places that restricted length of folding knife blades. This also became a knife that I would drop in a kit or in one of my jacket pockets, and I've talked about that before, how I just tend to seed knives in my jacket pockets, so I always have one, even though I might forget they're there for sometimes months at a time. Yeah, that was something I would do with this. It was inexpensive. You could probably pick one of these up for $30 or less. It's light, it's slim. Is it the sturdiest knife on the planet? It actually, I would say it feels cheaper than it's turned out to be. But again, it's seen a lot of use as a utility knife, and in an emergency, I would feel a whole lot more confident with this as a defensive tool than that. Let's go one step smaller. The Gerber Mini Covert. All right, reviewed this before. Smaller, thinner blade. Again, another knife I've carried as an EDC in restrictive areas or dropped in a pocket. Used as a utility knife, yes, a lot, but I would still feel a lot more confident with this than this in a defensive situation, even though this is a significantly smaller blade, and that is all about the grip, which leads me to the potential to be continued. Yeah, it's pretty as is, but what if I broke off the bone handle scales and basically turned that, what's now a full tang, into a stick tang inside a stouter grip? Would that make this a better knife, or just figured out some other way to build up this grip to be more hand-filling? Would it make it a better knife? Probably, but frankly, I'm just not feeling it. It's not inspiring me to do that. Now, I am idly considering, would there be a difference in usefulness between this folded steel version and the stainless steel version? I don't know, and I don't think it's worth my money to give it a try at this point. And if you happen to have that version of this knife or this version of this knife and have put it to better use, let me know about that. Let's get our conversation started in the comments, or similar size fixed blades. Give me some recommendations. Otherwise, yeah, I think we need to get back into sanity, into some more usefully, not necessarily sized, but shaped knives. Until then, thanks as always for watching, following my journey, putting up with my madness. Subscribe to the channel, liking the videos, and I hope to see you back for, well, something significantly more sizable than, yeah.